to talk to the Americans out there. This is a few other observations of this. When some people are saying they need more student loan debt to be forgiven than 10,000, I've seen people on both sides who want more and saying this is not enough. People are still
Yeah.
struggling. We need more than $10,000. And then some people who say like, oh, don't. Why are the people objecting? It's just $10,000.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the whole thing, like when American says poverty, like Americans literally mean things figuratively. People literally mean things
Yeah.
figuratively, especially Americans, especially when talking about political issues. Because when they say, oh, I'm oppressed, when Lizzo goes on stage and says she's oppressed, I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no. Or when somebody says they're in poverty, when somebody says it's just $10,000, I'm like, $10,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize that still, for majority of the world, don't even earn $10,000. Like
Yeah.
many countries, majority of the countries in the world don't even have an average GDP, an average earnings of people at $10,000. Entire
Yeah.
families. Like this is crazy money that's being thrown around. People just the money printer just going. People are just so used to that to think $10,000 is such an insignificant amount of money is crazy to me. It's crazy. It's craziness to me.
Well,
And when you look at
I was gonna say it's funny you bring up 10 grand because I was thinking I have this friend who's kind of like left leaning and she grew up in a wealthy family, and her parents were gonna give her 10 grand to go on a trip to Egypt, and she made it sound like it was no big deal, and I had to explain to her, I'm like, you know,
what?
most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. What is it? The average
Yeah.
American is under 500 in savings, and the response was kind of like, "Oh, really?" And then like what I wonder when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, do you only hang out with other rich kids and you just compare your lives? It's like, oh, this friend got to go to Switzerland with 15 grand. Like, oh, my parents bought me a Honda Civic, but this friend got a Corvette. Like, is that just, you're just comparing your life to other rich kids? So then when you complain things are unfair, it's just by that comparison rather than like bigger picture. I mean, that's how it comes across to me anyway.
Yeah, and this is not even like a natural thing. Like we all, like Stephen and I have conversations. So when we're talking about things, I often think, okay, I'm comparing. I wonder what Stephen would think about this, or people in our circle. So you kind of relate that way, but then you can go out to that. And I do understand with some celebrities, like with someone like Lizzo, she might say she's oppressed, but she's only focusing on people in her circle. When a
Yeah.
Meghan Markle comes out and says, "Oh, I'm oppressed," she's in her mind, she's elevated from the hoity-toity regular people, and in some way, she is as being a princess of sorts. But she's
Yeah.
married into like the most like wealthy white supremacist family like in existence right now,
Yeah.
and she's married and elevated herself into that. So she's not looking at some single mother living in like 50 miles from her in LA, like struggling day to day, working 3 jobs to take care of her 2 kids because her husband like left and things like. No, she's not thinking about that person. She's looking at the other princesses and princesses and seeing the little that she knows about them and
Yeah.
thinking, in her perception of how they're treated, I am oppressed. So I can kind of get that because that's a common thing that we do. But then we have to understand there are some things where it's like, realistically, are you though? And there's a sadness of this because reality itself does teach you, does strengthen you, does form a stronger mind. And when you've been sheltered and stuck in these kind of small little bubbles, I think you are detached from actual general society. Like we're just talking about how like when you have kids, they kind of burst your bubble and make you look at things in a different sort of way. And that's a simple thing. And then a lot of these people in these kind of environments, in these kind of ideations, are stuck in their own little arrested development that they don't really see out of these little bubbles that they're in. And it's tough because reality is going on, and eventually some of these people are faced with the reality and they just crumble from it. But maybe America is and the West is actually good enough to maintain these people in their is Lizzo ever really going to have to face reality? Probably not. She's got enough
No.
money to deal with any like the health issues should come from her weight. I don't think she's like horrible with like funding. I think even she stopped making music right now, she's probably made enough to be rather wealthy and well off for the rest of her life. If Meghan
Yeah.
Markle got a divorce, she'd probably be fine. She'd probably still have her hundreds of millions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why should they do anything?
Yeah.
Why should the kids who are graduating with these student loan debts really change if they're going to have some sort of forgiveness program where they understand after a certain amount of years, I'm just not going to have to pay this money back if I just work for the government. And so I understand this kind of thing, but regardless, it's just blah.
Well, I
Okay.
also wondered with some of these types, like the person I described, like if there's some kind of like on some level, maybe consciously or subconsciously, like they know how well off they are, but if they look at the bigger picture, then they would have to own up to the fact that, okay, my life's not that bad. Maybe a lot of the shortcomings are my own fault, all that. Like I have way more opportunities than most people, but it's like they
Mhm.
don't want to accept that because then they have to look in the mirror. And I think for some people, it's like they'd rather just say, live in that bubble and just compare themselves to similar people. Again, I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.